but I decided to go back to school soon after, studied accounting in an MBA program at Rutgers, more aligned with my undergrad interests and other work and internships at Prudential and other places. After I finished graduate school, I started working downtown for a CPA firm on the Lower East Side and on Wall Street at the time. It's now just downtown by where his family is, and by the mayor's former press secretary, Stu Gloser. They're good friends. I also worked a bit at a French accounting firm. I studied French as a major undergrad as well, and know a bit about French culture, Florence, Italy. So my boyfriend's from Algeria with relatives in France. So I do a lot with, international aspect of business as well.
Well, we are been talking a lot about ways of financing the arts. So I guess an accountant would be somebody who might actually find ways to do that. We give tax breaks to major corporations to keep them in New York. Do you think it makes economic sense to support our cultural institutions
Yes.
in the same way?
I do. I think that one of the most valuable aspects to a large city like Paris, like New York, like some of the other major cities is the arts. And I've spent a lot of time in Philadelphia as well with the government there, where they have museums, arts, culture, and I think it's extremely important to keep it in New York City where it's even better. So yes, I think it's important to help fund the arts, and I wrote a previous speech in which I criticized both the Democrats and Republicans, the typical Democrats and Republicans, for their way that they fund programs. The Republicans sometimes are only worried about their own household and don't reach out to support other people like artists, which is very important. And that's why Mayor Bloomberg called himself going Democrat when he said he wanted to help out different organizations. And I know he gives a lot of funding to the arts. Now,
Wait. He gives a lot of personal funding to
There's
the
one
arts.
thing.
He has cut back on city funding to the arts.
Yeah, his people usually tell him
One
what
of
to
the
do.
topics here is whether the city should give 1% of
Well,
its budget to the arts.
I know there's a lot of budget problems right now, and I know that I read that part. Yeah, he gave a lot of personal funding to the arts and to African Americans and a lot of people, so he calls that going Democrat. Well, his people advise him on the city. I guess that's his independent aspect. I think that a lot of the Democrats in government also do something like a not very hardworking, responsible way of allocating money, and that they tax people, even an artist who maybe makes a few $100,000 a year. They might need that money. Maybe they have unpaid bills, debt, loans, educational
You know artists who make
expenses.
a couple $100,000 a year?
Well, I
You must
don't
be
know.
hanging out with Jeff Koons.
Sometimes a household. Well, I don't know how much they make. My mom has a friend who's an artist in Hoboken. Her husband was a professor, a math professor. So sometimes if it's a wife with a husband, in my town where I grew up, the librarian in elementary school, her husband was some sort of artist. They normally live in one or several million-dollar houses. So the artists we have in the suburbs, like Westchester, they sometimes have enough money, but then again, they have children's educations and retirement accounts they might not be able to afford if they get a medical expense. There's different kinds of artists. Of course, there's the poor, starving artist, and there's also the wealthier artists. So I don't really know it's very funny because those are artists. But yeah, I mean, we know different kinds of artists. The point is, if you have like a gallery, let's say you open a gallery or some sort of business, and if you open, say, a gallery in Chelsea and you make a few $100,000 or something in 1 year that you are able to keep as income, you kind of need that money. So that's the point is they're usually not very wealthy, even if they make that in 1 year. In different ways, maybe they take a side job, maybe they're an art professor, maybe they get some sort of job. So because of this, they need their money when they make a few $100,000.
So is that the best thing that the city can do, do you think, to support people working in culture, like who own galleries or artists, is just keeping their taxes low so that they can afford to do their art?
Yes, well, I think it's important to not overtax people when they start to make a living, when they still don't have enough money, and that's what my accounting professors at Rutgers in the department, when I went back as a student a few years ago, more than a few years ago, we all wrote about how Obama was doing that. He was taxing people who barely have enough money. They would call them several $100,000 a year. He was calling them rich. They don't have enough money. Businesses that don't have enough money, perhaps over $1 million, they were taxing exorbitantly. And you can't afford this. I mean, most of the people sitting here, if you make one time $300,000 or $500,000, you don't want more than half of it taxed away, or a large percent. So that's a serious problem we're talking about, a one-time a job that you get, maybe that job won't exist anymore. So it's a very serious problem in this country when people are are taxed when they can't afford it. That's what we're thinking, is that that's the Democrat, the Bill de Blasio system where he tries to make people poor, and my union endorsed him by not advocating pay raises, by taxing people who, it's very, very serious. If you can't afford to go to work, you have to take out loans, there's no more money for you. And he tries to fund, say, a children's educational program by borrowing from people who barely have enough household expenses. You can't move every year because you're getting poor because of they're trying to make people poor and then tax them on top of it. So it's a very serious problem in our country. They've been talking about it since the previous Obama election, and I think this applies especially to artists as well. A lot of them might be in education and other fields with budget problems. So that's what was.
Well, they say that the way to make a small fortune as an artist is to start off with a big fortune.
Well, I guess that's true. It's certainly I didn't go into art. First of all, I don't have that kind of talent. Second of all, I don't have that kind of funding. I know that artists aren't necessarily the most lucrative fields to go into unless you happen to have a lot of expertise. Well, that said, I do have a friend from growing up. She had a PhD in art history and now has a job, I think, as an appraiser, if I remember correctly. So they are able to earn a living. I think she might even be teaching at the college level as a professor and doing academic research. So there are opportunities for people who study art, but you have to put out a lot of money. I think her family was somewhat rich, more than most people, in order to pay that much to go into art history.
You seem to have a lot of rich friends, but...
well, they're not very rich. That's the whole point. They can't afford these taxes, yeah.
I'm wondering...
but you're saying a new artist who maybe has a talent but doesn't have a lot of money.
Right. What was your own experience as a kid becoming turned on by art, by music, by painting, by dance, by whatever?
Okay, well, I did study the French horn for many years. My parents paid for lessons starting when I was in 5th grade. I tried the violin. I didn't like it, so I switched to the French horn. I played in college when it wasn't very popular in wind ensemble, orchestra, bands. And then I did stop because I didn't have the talent. I basically was tone deaf in elementary school and decided to teach myself how to hear, unusually, the musical notes by cupping my ears. And now I appreciate music, recognize the music.
But you picked one of the hardest instruments in the world
well,
to play,
yeah, you have to hear the tones to be able to make the sounds and have it sound out the right notes. And there are some challenges when it gets more difficult. Yeah, it was somewhat challenging, and some people worked harder than me, like the valedictorian types. Someone was better who wasn't talented. But I just decided to go into things I liked more, like French or finance or other interests. But I think it's good when you hear something like the Carmina Burana or very nice pieces, Vivaldi, the Four Seasons, you recognize the music, and it's a really good, like Mozart, you start to recognize the patterns. There's a lot that you're able to appreciate about music. And art, the same thing. I took art history. I wasn't very good at it. I went to Florence. I saw Botticelli, all the famous artists. And it's good to know things about it and be able to recognize that talent. But it's a bit expensive. Not everyone can afford private lessons or to pay for a college course or go to a different country when they're at that age. So yeah, I think there should be more funding and programs there, and that's basically what I'm trying to say, is that from the accounting standpoint, it's very important to spend extra time and dedicate a few salaried employees to scrutinize the budget and eliminate people who maybe aren't the same people who even attended tonight, might be at their job, if they are there, not doing anything, collecting salaries. When I showed up at my job at City College, the security guard said, that person over there, she's been collecting a large salary for years. And I don't know what that means, but it sounds like they probably don't deserve it. And so there's a lot of people like that probably on the budget. Also, there's buildings that way. Buildings they've sold, probably other buildings that are collecting, nothing, just collecting dust. And we need to sell buildings that aren't being used or are being used inefficiently. So we think it's important to sell buildings, sell salaries, get rid of salaries for people who eliminate salaries for people who aren't doing their job, and also try to do things to fix the budget. That way, perhaps find sources of revenue more, such as the taxi cab medallions, examine the pension system that everyone's talking about now, make sure it's good for both the people and the city, and also save money. So if they look at the budget, as most of us do in our own bank accounts, if you have your own bank account, you see there's been bank fees, you see other accounts offer better interest rates. That's the same thing we need to do with the government budget, and I'm convinced they're not doing that, and that's why they want to tax people who earn a living who can't afford it.
Ceceilia Berkowitz, thank you very much.
All right, thank you very much. I'm glad to meet you all.